Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in an act of transfixing coincidence, Keir Starmer, the new Labour leader, has been writing about a policy that patrons and I were discussing just this weekend, namely further devolution for Scotland, but going much further with the idea of a federal Britain. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, this Sunday, patrons and I were discussing the idea of Britain as a federal state. Someone was suggesting, well, isn't it already because of devolved parliaments? And I was saying, well, no, because if Britain were federal, then Westminster alone wouldn't have been able to push through the legislation needed for Brexit. Parliaments in Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland would have had their say as well. But Keir Starmer, the new Labour leader, is right on it. And he's preparing the case for a future Labour government, but laying the groundwork for it now in terms of getting these changes implemented as soon as possible. One thing that has impressed me about Starmer is just how fleshed out his ideas have been from the get-go. I remember in last year's general election, Corbyn supporters were hailing the 100% Corbyn manifesto that we were sadly about to crash and burn with, although I don't really think the essence of the manifesto was at fault there. But, I said, well, but he ran the 2017 general election. That was his manifesto, I said. Yes, they said, but he'd only been leader for about a year and a half then. Didn't have time to make it his own. Didn't have time. He was leader for nearly 2 years before that general election. He'd been in politics for decades. Are you going to tell me he didn't have enough time to flesh out his own policies by 2017? And true enough, if you look at the manifestos, 2017 manifesto, very, very similar to the 2015 one that Ed Miliband produced, and 2019 was very different. But Starmer looks like a man who's ready to go right now. If there were a general election at the end of this year, he'd be ready to go. He wrote that he was going to work out the convention needed for this federal Britain from opposition. He's not going to talk about it in purely policy terms that would sound good in a manifesto, get into government and then get it sorted out and work out the details. No. He wants the details sorted so that if he does win the next general election, it's ready to go the next day or to begin being implemented. It will, of course, mean major constitutional changes. This is a leader who wants to use his time in opposition as an opportunity to work out the details before getting into government so that he wastes no time. I mean, this is something that would take a few years to set up for a start. And a federal Britain is the only thing that has any hope of keeping at least Great Britain in a functioning union. Ultimately, Brexit and Scottish independence movements have fed on the idea that ordinary people are not listened to. Brexit found a particularly comfortable home in England because we have no voice at all. At all. Other parts of the UK have their own parliament. England has nothing. And people point out, well, there are English matters only decided, but they're decided in Westminster. Yes, Westminster, but that is the same as the seat of national government. There's no distinction between the England-only things being discussed in Westminster and England-only things being discussed in a separate seat. And also, it's the same representatives. We don't even elect representatives to decide England-only matters. So it's just the normal MPs that decide national matters. We don't have our own elected politicians deciding regional affairs in their own seat of power. And in fact, there shouldn't be a devolved English seat. There should be several. It's much bigger. It should be at least 3. I would argue 4. It creates a disconnect. We don't even have our own anthem at sporting events, for goodness sake. There is no English identity. It doesn't exist. You have individual identities within counties. I come from Yorkshire, where, of course, we've got the best identity, so I'm quite lucky in that regard. But beyond that, there is no English identity beyond that which is ripped from our souls by the nationalists, giving us a bad name around the world. Scotland does have a devolved parliament, but it doesn't get a say in major constitutional issues that affect more than just Scotland. It can only decide on affairs that only affect Scotland. Brexit poked at this particular weakness in the system. It's fundamentally wrong that people in Scotland should vote against Brexit and still be forced to go through with it. And the same is true, of course, of Northern Ireland. And that error in the system has allowed nationalism to flourish in Scotland. And only when you share power across the country will the country feel united. When people feel that the others are making decisions for them, of course you're going to get a disconnect. You need representatives that you feel are batting for you. And it is largely perception-led. But perception is really important in national unity. And only when you've got those representatives that you see batting for you, having influence, will you feel connected. And Starmer seems right on it. He's been open about the fact that the Labour Party have completely lost touch with the people of Scotland. In truth, it's lost touch with everyone on a local level. Labour, in the last few years, has tried to centralise everything. So there has been a huge disconnect throughout the country at the regional and the local level. It's just that the further you get away from the London bubble, the more that disconnect was felt. So I, for one, will be looking forward to seeing what plans are made for this UK federal system, because I firmly believe that it is absolutely essential for me to retain what's left of my citizenship, or the citizenship I was born with. I've already lost my European citizenship. I don't really need to lose my national one as well. So anyway, there we go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.